The Chicago Bears released an open letter with some new renderings for a potential Arlington Heights stadium. And for Chicago Bears fans, you can either embrace the excitement and look forward to a bright future, or resist the change and go out kicking and screaming.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today, and hopefully every day, because here on the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Bears is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. On the show today, it's Bears Stadium talk. We're going to get into a lot of the different dynamics at play here. We'll look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of a new stadium. We'll look at the renderings for the larger development project around the stadium and where the Bears are careful with their language on how they're talking about this and how they're not talking about this, and how this public negotiation series continues with the city of Chicago, with Arlington Heights, and trying to get some public support, fan base type thing roped into it, and why a lot of this still feels inevitable. We just don't know exactly what it will end up looking like. But there's a lot of different moving parts here, and I think a lot to also be excited about with this stadium. Like, that's what it comes down to, is you have a sector of Bears fans that never want to leave Soldier Field and don't want to be a dome and don't want all this stuff, and just say, you know, this is how it's always been done, and this is the way, you know, the tradition and the history and all that. And I have a lot of respect for that and that feeling and that idea. And I think part of it is because I come to it as a younger person that doesn't carry, I don't have as long of a general life experience with that stadium specifically, and just being in downtown Chicago. I know, like, Soldier Field wasn't always, you know, the whole thing, but right, I understand the emotions and the feelings as far as leaving downtown potentially to go to a place like Arlington Heights, but that's becoming the norm in the NFL. You look across the league, many of the teams don't play directly in the city that they claim. You know, like Buffalo is not right in Buffalo, of course. The Cowboys are not right in Dallas, right? There's a number of them across the league, and some teams that you might not think about or expect. You might not think, oh, like, I didn't realize that team wasn't even directly in the city, but it's, you know, within a certain number of miles, and the Bears around there would be that way with Arlington Heights. And when you start to look at this new proposal for this 326-acre mega complex that the Bears are looking at, it's really easy to get on board and feel like this thing could be special if it comes together the way that the Bears are talking about it coming together. And there's a reason they talk about it on such a grand scale, right? This is part of the negotiating process, is sort of putting that anchoring point out first, right? When you go to the public and say, see, look at what we could do. You're sort of shooting for the stars a little bit, not necessarily exaggerating per se, but knowing that what you say now and what you project now you're not guaranteeing X, Y, or Z, right? You're not going to be specifically held to it looking exactly this way in this exact layout. It's just sort of like, here's an idea, what do you think type of deal. Like, the Bears put out an open letter regarding Arlington Park, and they said, you know, of course, they signed the purchase agreement to secure the rights to purchase the property, but there are conditions before they can close on the property. And even if they do close on the property, it doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to develop it. So, like, there's still a lot to be decided, but they put in some specific language about how this might work. They said if the team does proceed with the purchase of the property, and if the Bears organization chooses to proceed with development of the property, it would be one of the largest development projects in Illinois state history. They envision a multi-purpose entertainment district anchored by a new best-in-class enclosed stadium. That means domed, providing Chicagoland with a new home worthy of hosting global events such as the Super Bowl, college football playoffs, and Final Four. Make no mistake, this is much more than a stadium project. Any development of Arlington Park will propose to include a multi-purpose entertainment, commercial/retail, and housing district that will provide considerable economic benefits to Cook County, the surrounding region, and the state of Illinois. The letter goes on and on and on, restaurants, office space, hotel, new parks, open spaces, and other improvements for the community to enjoy. That all sounds nice. It all sounds super cool. Sounds like it could be a fun environment to be around. It also sounds particularly expensive when you call it one of the biggest projects in Illinois, the state history. They said it could create almost 50,000 jobs and have almost $10 billion in economic impact. And what the Bears did was some specific language they threw in here. It says, quote, "While the Bears will seek no public funding for direct stadium structure construction, given the broad long-term public benefits of this project, we look forward to partnering with the various government bodies to secure additional funding and assistance needed to support the feasibility of the remainder of the development." So the Bears, careful to say, my reading of that is the Bears would not look for outside money for just, the stadium part of the larger property. And trust me, they put out some renderings. It is a much larger property. I mean, it's 300 acres or whatever, but just the actual stadium building part, they say we're not going to seek public funding for direct stadium structure construction, but of course would look for public funding for the rest of it. And so that's a nicer way of sort of easing it and softening it as a burden on Arlington Heights, and also sort of a way of trying to play hardball with the city of Chicago about things at Soldier Field, saying, if we go to Arlington Heights, we'll pay for our own stadium over there. We don't even need you, Chicago, right? That's what they're trying to say. And so Chicago is trying to sort of play a little bit of hardball. We'll hear how Mayor Lori Lightfoot responded with kind of putting her foot down a little bit too. And we'll look at some of the pros and cons between the stadium in Arlington Heights and Soldier Field, and why I still think embracing change in one form or another is the best way to go about this. And it's still going to be a win-win for Chicago Bears fans either way. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our official daily fantasy partners at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy, but even better. It's not like regular daily fantasy because you're not competing against other people. It's you against the house. You are in control. You pick 2 to 5 players and you decide if they'll score more or less than their PrizePick projections. And then you can win back up to 10 times money on any of your entry, not just for Bears games this season, not just for the NFL season as a whole, but NBA, MLB, hockey, soccer, tennis, college sports, esports, NASCAR, you name it. PrizePicks has opportunities for you to play. You make your entry in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy. I love getting my picks in on their website, looking ahead at Justin Fields props for this game, over under 1.5 touchdowns. I think I know where I'm going there. Plus, when you're ready to cash out, it's safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you an extra $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 at prizepicks.com. We know this stadium back and forth will be ongoing for a while, but it's all trending in this direction of the Bears likely to leave. It's a matter of when more so than if at this point. And they keep sort of putting out these little, these renderings here and statements there, and they're having a big public meeting tomorrow. That's depending when you're listening to this, Thursday, September 8th at a high school gym in Arlington Heights, so people can kind of see more of what the possible developments might be at this Arlington Park site in Arlington Heights, which is a distinction that I think has been difficult for people outside of the sort of greater Chicago area there. But I think there's a lot of real tangible benefits for Chicago Bears fans about the way this process is going down and what the results can ultimately be in terms of putting together a stadium situation here that just improves the game day experience all around. And I'm not here to just crap on Soldier Field for a whole podcast, because there's a lot to love about Soldier Field, and there are certain benefits that Soldier Field has that a new stadium in Arlington Heights would not have, and that certainly includes the history and the feeling, and of course there's that idea of like being outdoors in downtown Chicago and really having that sort of like big city type of feel, as opposed to being out in the suburbs. And of course there's the swirling winds that Bears kickers tend to get more used to than opposing kickers at times, and certainly the field conditions the Bears players tend to get a little bit more used to than opponents when they come to Chicago and have to adjust to that a little bit more. But I think it's been particularly difficult for people with the idea of Bears use the word enclosed stadium, this idea of a dome for where the Chicago Bears play. And I think there's a few things about this that stand out to me as most important. One, enclosed does not have to mean permanently closed, right? So if they want to host a Super Bowl, the Final Four, they mentioned sporting events, but you could also host other large non-sporting event type venues there. You have to have a stadium that is closed, that can completely close off from the outdoors, that can be then temperature controlled, environmental controlled, limited from precipitation, all that stuff, to be able to host like big time sports mega events like that. But that doesn't preclude them from potentially having a retractable option. I'm not saying they would, and I don't think that's been specifically part of the discussion either way. I mean, certainly it has to have the ability to be closed. That is non-negotiable. Perhaps it could be negotiable to have a stadium roof that could open, but I think we need to work collectively on getting past this idea that being in the open air in Chicago in December is better in any tangible way, in any measurable way. I totally understand the feeling, right? That idea of bear weather, of bundling up, braving the elements, and going out and cheering on your team because you're tough and can handle being out there in the elements to watch your team, and it makes you a better fan than these other teams that sit in their warm domes year round or whatever. And you feel like it feels like it makes the Bears tougher. They're more physical. They're more resilient. They've got, they've built up this sort of endurance to be able to play in the cold, and that these warm weather teams come to Chicago and aren't used to the cold. And that's that and I feel that, and I understand that, and I don't want to detract from the value that has for fans to have that feeling. But I keep using the word feeling for a reason, because that's all that it is. And I don't want to diminish it by saying, oh, it's just a feeling, but like there's not measurable evidence of Bear weather truly being a true home field advantage for the Bears. You can point to times when warm weather teams have come to Chicago in December and lost, but you cannot in any way prove that the weather and the temperature is what lost those games. Maybe it has some small amount of impact, but in the National Football League, good players and good coaches win football games. And the Bears have not had a good enough record at home in December to somehow be evidence that being at home in bear weather is such a big advantage over them. At the end of the day, if the Bears are the better team and perform better, they're going to win the game. And maybe you think the wind and the cold can help them be the team that performs better, but generally speaking, it's the outcomes of games have not been decided by how the Bears perform in their stadium, outdoors, at home, in those cold weather games. It's much, much more important to just be how good of a football team you are. And so if that's not a factor in winning and losing, then it's about putting together the best fan experience to get maybe a different feeling. Maybe you won't have that outdoor dome feeling, but you could have so many other fun, great things that makes your game day experience that much better to sort of outweigh what you might be losing from a feeling standpoint of not being in that outdoor sort of environment. And that's what I think it comes down to for the stadium, is that you can find so many more advantages for yourself as a fan, especially if you're bringing family members, children especially, and just making it a more holistic game day experience. To me, that's the real advantage for a new stadium. It's for you, right? It's for Bears fans. It's also for the players, right? Of course, like a new stadium will get nicer locker rooms, nicer facilities, etc. Like I'm not saying it's all for you. They will make money off of it. It will be profitable for them. But like, they're not leaving, so they wouldn't leave Soldier Field to go to Arlington Heights because they think specifically that it's going to make them win a lot more ball games. It's for you so they can get more of your money, but it's still for you, right? At the end of the day, that they're not doing this because like, oh, well, it'll hurt the fans, but it'll help us win more games. Like, no, that's not the point of this whole process. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind as we learn more about the stadium and go through more and more of this. We'll kind of get into some of the logistics of like, okay, bigger stadium, nicer stadium, what that means and how that can enhance the fan experience for those of you that get to go to these games, and how it just feels like embracing this change can be for the better. Next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is powered by Built Bars, the world's best tasting protein bars out there. I've never had a protein bar that tastes as good as what I get from Built. Not only Built Bars, but Built Puffs. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate. They're soft. They're easy to chew. They taste sweet and delicious like a candy bar, but they're good for you. They're low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. It sounds like too good to be true, but you bite into the cookie dough chunk or the brownie batter flavors. I mean, goodness. Those things satisfy my sweet tooth, but don't give me a bunch of sugar and calories that make you feel like crap afterwards. They really are good for you, and they really do taste good. You got to try them for yourself. Tasting is believing, and I've been a believer for more than a year now. Head on over to Built.com and use our promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. You can use that code multiple times at every order. One per order, but you can use it on every reorder. I do every single time I order. LOCKEDON, LOCKED15 to get 15% off at Built.com. If we can get past the nostalgia and the history and the feeling of Soldier Field, we can embrace an even better fan experience at a potential stadium in Arlington Heights. And I think it's one of these things that's like, it all sounds nice and conceptual, but you don't know until you actually get to experience. Like if you've talked to anybody that's been to the Raiders' new stadium in Las Vegas, or to a lesser extent, SoFi Stadium in LA, you can really feel when a stadium enters into the 21st century in a brand new way. Like you can renovate stadiums and add, QR codes and self-serve checkouts, for drinks. Like I know like Lambeau's got that now too, where you just go up to a counter, you just go up to a fridge and take a beer out and then scan it yourself and pay for it yourself. And there's never even a person. There's never even a line. It's a weird thing. But like, so you can put those things in a stadium, but when you build a fresh stadium that has all the bells and whistles to it, plus the most important part of this for me is the entertainment district around the stadium. You don't know what you've been missing until you get something like this. And I think the renderings can at least give you a visualization of what this might look out from a layout standpoint. So it's like they've got the stadium on one end of this sort of sprawling property, what they call like sort of the stadium district. And of course, there's like, think of it as like kind of what you see at Soldier Field now, where there's the stadium and there's a bunch of like outdoor space, some green areas, some looks like water features as well, some bridges that kind of cross to get you into the stadium. And that would have essentially a lot of the same types of things. They haven't gotten to specifics yet, but generally we can assume It has the same type of thing that you would see at Soldier Field for game days now. Cool. But then the even larger portion of the property on the rest of the rendering is this mixed use district where it's like they build a little mini, I don't know, it's too small to call it like a mini town, right? I mean, there's not like, like government, but it's like, it's a whole like neighborhood, a built-in like commercial area neighborhood of like multiple blocks of a lot of parking, of course, but then like restaurants and even like shopping and, smaller little stages and event areas. And of course, bars and I'm sure brewery, distillery, winery type options. And all of a sudden, like your game day experience is not just show up, tailgate, go to football game, tailgate after football game, leave, right? Which is a fun experience. And that's the whole thing. My whole point here is like, this is does not diminish what you can do at Soldier Field. And that's not diminish Soldier Field. But let's make the point that Arlington Heights can be all of that you already have, plus more. Like that's what it feels like at the end of the day. It's like it will include all those things you like, except for like, the history, the things you can't actually replicate. I understand you can't replicate the location, and being able to go out in downtown Chicago afterwards is something that, yeah, you can't do. The Arlington Heights mixed use district would be its own sort of area venue for going out. It wouldn't be downtown, but you could go out after the game without having to just go straight home, right? That's the point. I don't know if you've ever been up to Milwaukee, where there's the Deer District, famously outside of where the Milwaukee Bucks play. But this looks like that on steroids, where it's like it's all a pedestrian area around the team, and it's so much fun. And again, it's like you don't know what you're missing until you've experienced it. But it's like you don't even have to have tickets to the game to go to that entertainment district area and have fun. Like I was there when the Milwaukee Bucks won the championship 2 summers ago, or I guess it was last summer, but 2 seasons ago now. And like the environment of being around that in an area that's already designed for it, right? It's not just the chaos of like already being in downtown Chicago. I mean, the chaos after a Bears championship game, everything would be shut down and there'd be nowhere to possibly go. And even if they're already in Arlington Heights, that would probably also still be the case in Chicago. But it's just like, it's made for this, and it's all there, and it's all streamlined, and everything connects super easily. To me, it's almost like Apple products, right? You know how like if you're an iPhone user, or you have a MacBook, and you have AirPods, and you have an Apple Watch, and you've got AirTag. I mean, you have the family of Apple products, and they all just seamlessly connect. That if you have a file on your phone, you can AirDrop it to your computer and AirDrop it to your watch. You don't have to plug anything in. You don't have to reconnect anything. Whereas like when you're trying to connect your Lenovo computer to your Dell keyboard and your Samsung phone, right it connects, but there's like barriers to doing it. It's just a little bit more of a hassle to like, you either got to plug this in here or upload it to like Google Drive, or, you have to take a few extra steps to share things between devices. But one of the big advantages of Apple products is that they're just all made to speak to each other and listen to each other directly. That's what that type of entertainment district around the stadium can be. It's like all encompassing and all in one, as opposed to like leaving Soldier Field and having to get an Uber to go to where you want to go downtown and connect with other people and get through traffic and all the different things. Like that entertainment district and this mixed use that would also have residential and have the hotels right into it. Like you don't need cars, you don't need Ubers, you don't need bikes, you don't need taxis. Like it's all encompassing and it's all there. But if you do want to drive in, it's easier to get in and out right off the interstate or right off the highway there in the suburbs, as opposed to trying to get into downtown Chicago. So it just feels to me like this is the future of what sporting events are going to be. Plus, you'd have, in theory, much better grass and taking care of the field than what we've been seeing already right now in Chicago. You would have a lot more seating capacity. Soldier Field, it's the smallest stadium in the NFL. I'm not trying to crap on Soldier Field, but just like more Bears tickets, more opportunity for you to go to games. In theory, more seats would be more supply in the supply and demand. So I'm not saying like ticket prices would become cheap in any way, but like you're not fighting for there are more tickets to be fighting for the same number of Bears fans, right? The number of seats could double, but the number of Bears fans in the world is not going to change. So you have more supply and the same amount of demand. In theory, basic economics says it could be easier to get Bears tickets there. Plus, you have the opportunity to have all these other events there and really make it this kind of thing. And the one last point I want to make about the stadium before we wrap up here is you see people on Twitter or whatever, social media, trying to politicize this in partisan type ways of this being a reflection of, how the city of Chicago is run and whatever political party feelings about, Democrats or Republicans or whatever it might be, like, oh, the Bears are leaving Chicago because the city is bad because of X, Y, or Z, and Arlington Heights is better. But this is purely about the quality of the stadium, what the Bears can get from Soldier Field, and what they can get from Arlington Heights. Don't let anybody take this stadium conversation and make it about the crime rate in Chicago or whatever, whatever kind of bullcrap people want to make it. That's them spinning this for their purposes to make it about something that it's not. It's just to try and make this more political than it already is. It's political in the sense that it's negotiating with a government, right? It's a private group and a government group negotiating over money, and that's by definition political, but it's not partisan politics when it comes to the stadium. And I've already seen enough of that on Twitter and on Facebook and social media where people are trying to say, oh, this is because of like left and right politics, and that just has nothing to do with any of this. And I want to make sure that, like, if you see people making it that's them looking to try and make it that, and it's not anything inherent about what we're seeing with this Bears renderings. I'm excited to see what more of these renderings looks like. I mean, when you see like the aerial view of like the stadium looking over this entertainment district out there, it really looks like there's a lot of potential to do some cool things. And you can even see downtown Chicago skyline from the south view of the stadium, like looking towards it. So I really think there's some real potential here. And I don't have skin in the game. I just think I've been around stadium development projects before, and I've, in my years as a journalist, have covered a few of these types of things. And the math bears out in there that it can be a great thing for the fans. You can make a lot of different arguments about public taxpayers and that side of the politics, and there's a reason why we didn't get into that as much on the podcast today, because that's a whole other discussion. But for me, what matters is how it affects you as a Chicago Bears fan. And I think if they move to Arlington Heights, you're going to have an even better fan experience. If they stay at Soldier Field, then that means the city of Chicago is going to make some overtures for them and improve Soldier Field in the ways that the Bears would want them to. And then you're going to get a better fan experience that way as well. So it feels to me like a win-win for you. It's just a matter of what that win looks like whenever this process keeps playing out. It's going to be a long process. The lease runs at Soldier Field for a long time. Of course, if they were going to build a stadium, it would take a long time to build that stadium. So, we're not going to go stadium crazy on the podcast here, but we'll check in when we get big developments like this throughout the process. So I hope you'll hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We'll get back to more true football, X's and O's on field. This is still by definition on field. The new stadium is the field. It's on the new stadium field. This was on field discussion, but we'll get into like Bears 49ers tomorrow. Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers. We're going to do our crossover Thursday podcast. It's a weekly feature where we talk to our other Locked On Podcast Network hosts. We'll get to know what's going on with Trey Lance, Kyle Shanahan. 49ers favored in this game. Should they be? Do we know what the 49ers are going to be? Are they getting an unfair benefit of the doubt here? I think generally the Bears are getting an unfair underestimation league-wide, but we'll see kind of what we get from Brian on his end. I think he's a pretty reasonable analyst about his team. He's not going to be over the top like, rah, 49ers are great at everything. He's very realistic about, hey, we still don't know what Trey Lance is, but we'll get a better sense of what the expectations are and what we should be looking for in that game. So make sure you come back tomorrow and make Locked On Bears your first listen tomorrow as well. If you're looking for your second listen, the Locked On Podcast Network is doing an Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, where we're going division by division through the NFL. And the NFC North podcast is out now. Our team of local experts, myself included, breaking down this division and really getting you the biggest stories for all of these teams, so you can get a sense of how the Bears are going to stack up here with the Packers, Vikings, and Lions. Go search Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Then come on back tomorrow for more Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.